The parking lot that wasn't. The store's windows showed a version of the parking lot that wasn't ours. It had begun subtly, as most unsettling things do. Marla, the night clerk, stood behind the counter, absently scanning the reflection in the glass for any hint of customers. Outside, the lot appeared empty except for a single sedan parked near the far curb. She tilted her head, noticing the license plate. A combination of letters she didn't recognize, though it looked vaguely familiar, as though she had seen it in a dream. Inside, the hum of the fluorescent lights wavered, a thin stutter beneath the steady buzz of the refrigeration units. A bottle of soda rattled slightly on the edge of the cooler shelf. Marla frowned, shrugging it off. Drafts were common at night, doors settling, the old building breathing. But when she glanced back at the windows, she froze. The car was gone. No, not gone, shifted. Its angle had subtly rotated, the headlights now pointing slightly off. And the lot itself had changed. A second sedan appeared, dark, parked impossibly close to the first, though she had seen no one drive it in. There were more lights in the distance. Street lamps that didn't exist, their glow pooling unnaturally over stretches of asphalt she had never noticed before. Marla blinked. She forced herself to breathe normally. Maybe she had been staring too long, letting her eyes play tricks. The lot was quiet, except for the occasional hum of a distant freeway. She returned to her inventory, trying to force focus on mundane tasks. Counting candy bars, straightening display racks. Then she heard it. A soft tap, 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 rhythmic and measured. She turned sharply. Outside the windows, a man was walking across the lot. He was small, hunched, wearing a dark coat. His movements were deliberate, unnervingly calm. For a moment, Marla thought she recognized him. Someone she had passed on the street earlier, perhaps. But no, the face was wrong. Familiar in shape, familiar in shadow, but distorted. She stepped closer to the glass. Her breath fogged a small patch of the window. The lot behind it now shimmered faintly, as if the cold air itself were a lens bending reality. The man looked directly at her, though she had never seen him before, and she jerked back. The lights in the store flickered again, and she cursed under her breath, checking the breaker box behind the counter. All circuits normal. The hum of the coolers continued without interruption. When she looked up again, the reflection had shifted. The sedan closest to the curb was now a hatchback, a bright red one that had never been in that spot. Its windows were opaque, glinting black even under the flickering lights. The second car, the dark one, was now farther back, near a painted line that didn't exist in reality. The lot's asphalt itself seemed to ripple, subtle waves rolling under the phantom cars, as though the surface were water pretending to be concrete. Marla's fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. She was rational, she had to be. Probably an optical illusion, the way fluorescent lighting bounces off glass, creating afterimages. She told herself this, forcing her gaze back to the lot. The man had disappeared. Not outside, not in the lot we know, but in the window's reflection he lingered. He leaned slightly, tilting his head to one side, and then, with a precision that made her stomach knot, he began walking toward the store. The movement was perfectly mirrored in the glass, yet impossible. Her reflection of herself, standing still, showed him advancing, while in reality the lot remained empty. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She ignored it. The call was probably a delivery confirmation, an automated alert from the warehouse. She told herself it didn't matter. The lot didn't matter. And yet, the Windows version of it did. Marla moved closer, pressing her forehead to the cool glass. She leaned forward to peer into the parking lot. Not the reflection, but the actual asphalt outside. Her breath steamed the pain. She wiped it clear, and the lot was empty, ordinary. The painted lines had their usual faint cracks. The distant freeway hummed in the dark. The street lamp near the curb swung lazily in the night breeze. She let out a shaky laugh, low and bitter, and turned back to the counter. When she looked again, the red hatchback had moved closer, so close that it nearly touched the glass. His door opened. Marla blinked. Nothing should have opened. She squinted. The lot beyond the windows was still empty, still real. But the windows version, the version she couldn't stop looking at, was alive, rearranging itself around her. A second tap echoed against the glass, soft and deliberate. She noticed then that the reflection of her own hands, pressed against the counter, didn't match her real movements. They lingered, tense, like shadows of her hands from some previous moment. The reflection didn't mimic, it rehearsed. Her pulse quickened. The lights flickered again. She tried to step back, but her feet caught on the edge of a box of instant noodles. She stumbled, reaching out for the counter, and in the same instant, the window's parking lot shifted once more. The red hatchback now occupied the spot nearest the door, engine humming softly. The man appeared at the driver's side, opening the door and stepping into it. He glanced at her, smiled. Only in the reflection. Only in the version of the lot she wasn't supposed to see. Marla swallowed, heart hammering. She tried to focus on the physical lot, the one she could touch, walk on. Stayed mundane, static. But the Windows version persisted, advancing like a separate layer of reality, one she couldn't ignore. The air felt thicker. The hum of the refrigeration units warped subtly, low and dragging, like sound stretched over time. The fluorescent lights flickered faster now, more insistently, making shadows crawl along the floor in ways they shouldn't. Marla's reflection began to move independently, tilting her head, shrugging her shoulders, mocking her. A car she didn't recognize rolled into the reflection, tires squeaking, stopping too close to the curb. Its driver leaned toward the window, and for a split second, she swore she could see her own face inside the vehicle, staring back at her. She yanked herself away. The store's bell above the door jingled, though no one had entered. Marla's fingers trembled as she reached for the lights at the front. She flicked them off and on. The hum shifted, the lot shimmered, but the reflection remained. Outside, the real parking lot remained as it always had. Empty, ordinary, indifferent. But the windows now framed a scene that felt inevitable, as though the reflection had been waiting for her to notice, waiting for her to acknowledge its existence. Marla stepped back from the glass. Her shadow stretched across the floor, long and thin, yet she could feel the eyes of something in the reflection tracking her. A figure, indistinct, leaning from the red hatchback. She could not move toward it, could not look away. The lights flickered again. A breeze rustled through the cracked door, cold and damp. The reflection's parking lot began to warp more rapidly now, spaces folding into one another, lines bending, cars growing impossibly tall then shrinking, like toys. The man emerged from the hatchback, walking slowly toward her. The reflection of his foot hit the floor inside the store a heartbeat before her real floor registered it. Marla's breath caught. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. The lot in reality would not allow it. The reflection did. And the reflection's version of her knew it. She froze. The man's face, closer now than possible, wore her expression perfectly. A pale mirror of fear. His hand pressed against the glass. Behind him, the lot twisted further, the asphalt curling toward the store like dark waves. Marla stumbled back, knocking over a stack of magazines. They tumbled to the floor, rustling, a hollow noise that echoed through the small space. Her own reflection stayed still, calm. The lot outside the glass remained empty, normal, sterile. But the version in the window had begun to wait. Marla blinked. Her pulse thundered. And then, just like that, the lights went out entirely. The reflection didn't. It remained, vivid against the sudden black, the red hatchback idling, the man smiling, and the parking lot bending impossibly, perfectly, toward her. She realized she didn't have to look at it. She could close her eyes. She could turn away. But some small, deep part of her knew she wouldn't, because the reflection was waiting, and now so was she. A customer asked if I could help them find the place they disappeared. The request was delivered politely, almost apologetically, as though the man knew it was unusual but hoped it might still be reasonable. Ethan looked up from the register. The bookstore was nearly empty, the way it always was after midnight. The last bus had passed half an hour earlier, and the street outside was quiet except for the distant hum of tires on wet pavement. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering with a slow, uneven pulse near the back shelves. Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry," he said. The man stood at the counter with his hands loosely folded. He looked ordinary in the way people often did at night, softened by the pale lighting and the quiet of the store. Mid-30s maybe, brown jacket, dark hair, no umbrella despite the rain outside. "I'm trying to find it again," the man said calmly. "The place I disappeared." Ethan waited for a smile or some indication that this was a joke. None came. "Do you mean a book?" Ethan asked. The man considered that. "No," he said. "A location." Ethan shifted his weight slightly behind the counter. The register hummed quietly beneath his hands, its green display reflecting faintly in the glass case below. Somewhere behind him, the refrigeration unit that held bottled drinks clicked on with a low mechanical groan. "What kind of location?" "The one where I disappeared." He said it exactly the same way without emphasis. The fluorescent light flickered again. Ethan felt the subtle unease that sometimes came with late-night customers. People who wandered in because they had nowhere else to be, people whose conversations drifted strangely. Still, the man wasn't aggressive, just calm, maybe confused. "That's not really something we catalog," Ethan said. The man nodded thoughtfully. "Yes," he said, "that's what I was worried about." He glanced over Ethan's shoulder toward the aisles. "Your layout seems similar." "Similar to what?" "To the one I remember." Ethan followed the man's gaze. Rows of shelves stretched through the store, neat and quiet. Paperbacks in narrow aisles. Hardcovers along the walls. The geometry was simple. Long rows, straight lines, nothing complicated. "I think you might be thinking of another store," Ethan said. "Possibly." The man began walking slowly past the counter. Ethan hesitated before stepping out from behind the register. The customer moved through the aisles with a deliberate calm, fingertips brushing the edges of shelves. His reflection drifted along the glass covering the display cases, elongated and slightly warped. "Did you disappear here before?" Ethan asked carefully. "Yes." The man stopped beside a shelf of travel guides. "I was standing somewhere like this," he said. "Then I wasn't." "That sounds more like you left." "No," the man said quietly. "I disappeared." The word settled into the store like dust. Ethan noticed then that the man hadn't picked up any books. He simply studied the shelves as though they were landmarks. "How long ago?" Ethan asked. The man tilted his head slightly. "That's difficult," he said. "Time didn't behave normally." The lights flickered again. Ethan glanced upward. The hum of the bulbs deepened briefly, stretching into a thin electric whine before stabilizing again. When he looked back down, the man had moved farther down the aisle. "Sir," Ethan said. The man stopped. "Something's wrong with the distances," he murmured. Ethan walked toward him. At first nothing seemed unusual. The aisle looked the same as it always did, paperbacks stacked in narrow rows, a small step stool halfway down. But as Ethan approached, something felt subtly incorrect. The aisle seemed longer, just slightly. He slowed his steps. "That stool used to be closer," the man said softly. Ethan frowned. "It's always been there." The man looked back at him. "Are you certain?" Ethan hesitated. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure. He had worked nights here for 8 months. The store layout rarely changed. Yet standing there now, he felt a strange uncertainty about the exact positions of things. The stool, the shelf labels, even the distance back to the register. He glanced over his shoulder. The counter looked farther away than it should have been. "See?" the man said gently. The hum of the refrigerators deepened again. The man continued walking. Ethan followed, uneasy now but unable to articulate why. The aisles stretched on. Shelves passed them slowly. Travel guides turned into history books. Then cookbooks, though Ethan didn't remember those sections being arranged in that order. Your memory is adjusting, the man said. My memory isn't. It's how it works. The man stopped again. This is close. Ethan felt the hair on his arms lift slightly. Close to what? The point. The fluorescent lights flickered faster now, brief pulses that made the shadows jump between shelves. Ethan noticed something else then. Their reflections in the glass display case at the end of the aisle. They didn't move exactly the same way. When Ethan shifted his weight, the reflection lagged behind by half a second. He stared at it. The reflection corrected itself. What happened when you disappeared? Ethan asked quietly. The man considered. I was standing here, he said, gesturing vaguely around them. Then the store continued without me. That doesn't make sense. Yes, that's not how disappearing works. That's what I discovered afterward. A silence spread between them. The ambient sounds of the store, buzzing lights, humming appliances, seemed slightly out of sync, like overlapping recordings played at different speeds. Ethan suddenly felt disoriented. How did you come back? He asked. The man looked thoughtful. I didn't, he said. Ethan stared at him. You're here. Yes. But you said. I disappeared, the man said calmly. I never returned. The fluorescent light above them snapped off for a second. Darkness. Then it flickered back on. The aisle looked longer again. Ethan turned toward the register. It was barely visible now. How far back is the front of the store? He asked. The man didn't answer. Instead, he crouched beside a low shelf and ran his fingers along the floor tiles. There was a seam here, he murmured. Ethan looked down. There was no seam, just smooth linoleum stretching forward. But this is where it happened, the man said quietly. A strange pressure filled the air, like the moment before a storm. Ethan became aware of the silence outside. No cars, no rain. Even the distant freeway sound had vanished. Only the humming lights remained. You asked if I could help you find the place, Ethan said. Yes. And if you do? The man looked up. His expression was calm, almost relieved. Then I can go back. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Why would you want to? The man stood slowly. Because I don't think I ever left. The lights flickered violently. For a moment, Ethan saw something impossible in the glass reflection at the end of the aisle. The aisle didn't end there. Continued, past the wall, past the back of the building. Rows of shelves stretching into dim, repeating corridors. And in the reflection, two Ethans stood in the aisle. One beside the man. One farther down the corridor, frozen mid-step. The lights steadied again. The reflection showed only the normal store. Ethan's breathing had quickened. Do you see it? The man asked quietly. No, Ethan said immediately. The man nodded. That means we're close. He stepped forward. Ethan instinctively reached out. Wait. The man paused. Are you sure you want to find it? Ethan asked. The man looked at him with a faint, sympathetic expression. I already did, he said. He pointed gently toward the floor. Ethan followed the gesture. A thin line had appeared in the linoleum. A seam, perfectly straight, running across the aisle. Ethan slowly looked back up. The man's reflection in the glass was already standing on the other side of the seam. But the man himself had not moved yet. Thank you for helping, he said softly, and then he stepped forward, disappearing exactly where the seam touched the floor. The aisle was empty. The humming lights continued. Ethan stood alone for a long time, staring at the seam. Eventually, the store returned to its ordinary silence. The seam faded. The aisle shortened again. The register was back where it should be. Everything was normal, except for one small detail. When Ethan finally walked back toward the counter, he noticed something in the glass reflection beside him. Someone else was walking down the aisle, perfectly calm, looking around slowly, studying the shelves, as if trying to remember where something important had once been. And after a moment, The reflection stopped and looked directly at Ethan. Then it spoke, quietly, patiently, as though it had asked the question many times before. "Excuse me," it said. "Could you help me find the place I disappeared?"